Hi guys, welcome back to our virtual classroom. Today we're going to be finishing up a reading for chapter 7. So just mainly the notes for chapter 7 on reasoning and fallacies. I do want you to continue to read the chapter, finish it off, and then I'm going to just cover 4 key points from the rest of the reading. And then the rest, we'll talk about the fallacies and how you should avoid those and be able to recognize those. Those can help you in refuting arguments as well. I'll start off with categorization and then analogy and authorization and plea. So this should be a short video. And then also there will be an upcoming writing assignment. On the last video, I told you I would change it up, break it up into 2 smaller essays. I thought that might still be too much, so I went ahead and I stuck to one essay before our major paper, and it'll be a 3-page paper. So it'll be a little bit shorter, but it'll be a persuasive genre, so that way it will be a little bit easier for you to construct on your own, building towards that last paper that you're going to be writing, your research paper. So let's get started. And then I'll post instructions on our Blackboard class page so that you can look at the upcoming assignment and of course, how can you apply all this? All right, so I do have some important announcements to make, but I'll go ahead and tell you about those in the instructions so you can have them in written form and, not having to rewatch a video over and over. So let me go ahead and share my PowerPoint here with you. It's rather short. I hope that you can get the most out of this. Okay, so again, this is coming from your textbook, chapter 7. And today I'm going to talk about categorization, analogy, authorization, and plea, which are other reasoning methods that are commonly used, some which we have talked about already, like analogy we've seen before, and a lot of you that analyze the Martin Luther King speech, where he uses that analogy in there. So we'll talk about more in detail. Okay, so categorization is one of those strategies that is used to logically organize an argument. And categorization organizes the concepts, and it works best when it serves as an initial gauge for differentiating one thing from another, especially if you're talking about research. That, let's say, for example, you conducted some research and then you're going to record your findings, and through that writing, you need to set aside the categories in the individuals that you looked at, or the criteria that you observed in certain people or in certain things that you were researching. So for example, you have sample A, sample B, sample C, and so on. And you could easily categorize them and then speak of those freely, kind of like as it is here in the little picture, where you have different colored squares, different colored triangles, and different colored circles, and then those might be individuals, but if you notice the different colors, right? So there's still some slight differences, but nevertheless, you're categorizing, let's say in this case, by shapes. All right, that is all fine and dandy until you come across the criteria that you want to actually categorize some of these things in. And when you are talking about people, you should really stay away from ethnicity and race and cultural differences of things of that nature, because that may lead into stereotyping, and then that's a little bit, you run into some problems there. And so superficial differences should not be the criteria for categorization. What you should look is at, let's say, for example, gender, or you should look at an age and even interest of some individuals. And so that will help you see correlations, that will let you see some type of behaviors that are happening, let's say, for example, in a particular age group, like, for example, senior citizens, teenagers, toddlers, just so that you can have something to compare with, right? So when you are looking at your criterias in categorization, you need to make sure that those criterias are going to give you the type of opportunities for you to study behaviors or for you to study correlations among things, okay? Definition is also part of categorization. This is more used when you are wanting to look at a particular meaning of a word or a particular meaning of a concept within your own essay. So what you do is you predefine that to avoid confusion and to avoid being questioned later on in your argument. You can strengthen your argument by simply eliminating that ambiguity to begin with. And when your concept is later questioned, they can always go back to your definition. So categorization, a definition, falls into that categorization strategy. Again, it's organizational. It is logical because it flows, and it allows you to talk about your samples or your things or your research or your evidence in a very organized and categorized way. Okay, just so you know, not every type of reasoning is doable in every essay. Obviously, there are different types of essays. For example, categorization could be used in a research-based essay. All right. Analogy could be used one to help you persuade, for example. All right. So to make an analogy is to draw similarities or comparisons between two things that may be slightly different superficially, but not integrally. In other words, there's something about those two things that may be similar, and through that, you could explain a really complex concept with a very simplified parallel of something that the reader might already be familiar with. Okay, and so what it does is that it enhances a comprehension, because now they have something to connect it with. Now they have something to draw a comparison to, all right? That familiarity, that relevancy. For example, the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech, he used that analogy of a check marked insufficient funds. And those of you that analyze that piece, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That he drew a comparison between being given a check that's marked insufficient funds, as in like the Negro population being given rights that they could not cash in. And so he compares that to the justice system in failing to award the Negro population with their rights. In this case, it was a very effective analogy, and towards the middle of the essay, he does drop it because analogies do have some limitations. He knew his audience, and he knew he would capture his audience in that way, but then he changes his strategy, okay? Because there are some downsides to it. Sometimes analogies might not be as precise as explaining the full argument, but they do lend a hand with comprehension. So people are able to understand you a little bit better, but it's not as precise because it's being simplified. Okay, so you still want to go back to explain that analogy. Okay, so some analogies may be ineffective if the audience is not familiar with the comparison. So this is where you have to be careful. Are you limiting your audience? You are also cutting back on your audience, your possible audience, because they are being left out of the equation. So if you oversimplify the concept, then it might not have the effect that you want it to have. You want to quickly return to your concept and the complexity of what you're trying to say and fully explain the parallel relationship. Leaving it to the audience may be risky, especially if it's something they might not be familiar with, because analogies already take away precision. And so be sure to use those carefully and take your time explaining them thoroughly and clearly, especially if it's like a difficult concept to compare to. If your analogy, the analogy that you use, should be self-explanatory, but if it isn't, don't take that chance. Okay, so decide if the analogy is actually helping you move forward with your argument, or is it not. Sometimes they can be distracting if you don't have the correct one. So it's a powerful tool to use. However, just keep in mind that it may take away precision, and that if you don't use the correct one, you're going to leave your audience out of it. All right. Alrighty. And authorization here, it's simply finding something to support your assertion. So it's really looking for an authority figure to support what you're saying. Obviously, you are not the expert on whatever research you're conducting. You may not be the expert at that. And so you're looking for testimony of an expert. In this case, for example, a doctor. It's ethos, in a sense. It's what it is. However, you may fall short if it's an attempt at ethos, if your authoritative figure is not who, might not be the correct one. So you definitely want to support your claims by finding the right testimonials. However, you need to actually look at who you're going to be using as your authority figure. All right. You can easily find someone to agree with you. That's not a problem. What the problem is that is the correct authority figure on the matter. All right. So right now with let's say with the coronavirus, everybody's talking about, doctors say this, doctors say that. Well, depends on like what type of credentials that individual has. Okay. In order to look for the correct authority figure, you need to make sure that you do your own research on the source of your evidence. So right now, there are tons of articles out there about coronavirus, especially if you log on to social media, Twitter, Facebook. They have all kinds of articles. And you click on it and you read it all, and oh my God, sometimes you take it to be true. But where is that coming from? There are some really, really unreliable sources out there. And sometimes they'll say, well, Dr. So-and-so said this. Well, sometimes if you do your research, that Dr. So-and-so is only a honorary doctor. That means that some university awarded him a doctorate's degree for having supported the university with some money or something to that, so to that extent. So check your resources, check your authority figure before you plug them in. Okay, you definitely want to support your claims, but make sure you do check your evidence and your sources first. Okay. Alrighty. A plea. Last but not least, is a plea. And plea relies on Aristotle's notion of appeal to emotion or to ethics. And by ethics, I don't mean ethos, but I mean morals and values of a community or a person. So you may persuade an audience to a cause by bringing stories, anecdotes, or some more personal connection, something more emotionally charged that will trigger a response from your audience. So let's say, for example, you want to trigger compassion, you want to trigger kindness or something. Doesn't have to be your own story. In fact, I would stay away from your own story. For example, unless it fits into the to here, but you might need to support it with more evidence so that you don't come out across as being selfish or something to that extent. However, powerful stories, there's some of you that have some powerful stories that would definitely move an audience. Those are good to use, all right, if it fits within your topic. For example, if you're writing about the importance of donating to Salvation Army, then bring in stories about people who rely on those lives or rely on those services, or whose lives have been changed by saved or changed by the Salvation Army efforts in a time of need. Have several testimonials of people, have moving stories, have experiences. So a plea is not begging, although, in the justice system, it would be, yes, it might be begging or pleading. But here in argumentation, a plea is emotionally charged, appealing to the emotions of a particular audience. So yes, you want to bring in that human aspect of it. Touch an individual with your words. Okay, so this type of appeal is mostly effective when it is well elaborated with details, imagery, or even dialogue. You need to make the audience see it, hear it, and feel it. Think back to your narrative essays in 1301. Some of you had these like really emotionally charged paragraphs where I could see your struggles, I could see your accomplishments, I could see all of that. But stick to that imagery, those details, that dialogue. That's what's going to make your plea effective. Okay. Otherwise, it may be ineffective if it's rushed or superficial, right? They're just going to see, oh, okay, so, percentages are just percentages. They're just numbers. But until you can actually see the numbers, see them happening, all right? They might be telling us, okay, we're at 10,000 deaths in the United States for coronavirus. That could be overwhelming, but it also could be, okay, 10,000. It's a big country. Okay. But it's not until you start seeing the real stories of people that have suffered, that have been infected, that are alone in this fight, in the hospital on their own, no loved ones around them. And they rely on just, some of them, the nurses and the doctors that come by. And because they're also in quarantine, it's difficult, right? So it's until you see those real stories that you start to feel that emotion, that personal connection, that humanity kicks in. Okay, so please, very effective. Again, this one depends on your purpose as well as the others. So plea and the authorization, of course, the analogy, they all depend on your audience and the nature of your topic. Okay, so this is the end of this chapter. Read the rest of the chapter. There's a small little section on fallacies. I want you to read through those. They have really good examples and the nature of those, how those fallacies happen. But for this week, just finish reading the book, and I'm going to post on Blackboard the assignment, the upcoming assignment. Review it. We are not actually going to start drafting. You can begin on your own, right? But the first thing will probably be on Tuesday, since our school is we're off for the Easter holiday and also for teacher workshop on Monday. So enjoy your weekend, and I hope everybody is doing well, and I miss you and I love you guys, and stay safe, stay home, and I hope to see you soon. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.